Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Frankie and today I have a very exciting video for you all that I have been planning for a while, and I am super excited to finally record for you guys. This is basically, as you have probably read in the title, a book recommendation video for books that I'm going to recommend to you based on your zodiac sign. Astrology is something that I am really interested in, and I'm trying to get like really good at knowing what I'm talking about when I'm talking about astrology. And so this idea for a video popped into my head and I was like, I have to do this as soon as possible. So I am doing it now and it's going to be super fun, and I really thought long and hard about what books I wanted to recommend. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope that you can find something in this list that you really like, whether it has to do with your zodiac sign or not. So the way that I did these recommendations is I did them mainly based off of your rising sign. So I would recommend using your rising sign for this recommendation video and reading the thing based on your rising sign, but you can also use your sun sign or your moon sign or even your Venus sign too if you want. If you're not sure how to figure out what your rising sign is, there are a few websites that can help you. My two favorites are cafeastrology.com and astro.com, and you basically just create a new birth chart. You put in your place of birth, your day of birth, and your time of birth, and you can figure out your rising sign and your entire chart basically. So I would recommend checking those out if you don't already know what your rising sign is, and I will link them below if you want to. I think that's all of the intro that I had to get through for this video. Let's get started. So first up is the recommendation for Aries. Aries natives tend to be really direct and forthright and competitive. They really love action and like stirring things up, but sometimes they struggle with finishing what they started. So I thought for Aries, I would recommend Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk. This is obviously the inspiration for the super popular movie starring Brad Pitt that a lot of people have seen and you might have seen. But this book is basically about this guy, and he feels really unsatisfied with his life and the way he is progressing through his life, his job, all of that kind of stuff. And one day he meets this guy named Tyler Durden, who starts like this like underground fight club with him, and from there a bunch of stuff happens, and I really like this book. I picked it specifically for Aries because of sort of the competitive nature of the fight club, you know. It's also really action-packed, there's a lot going on, it's really fast-paced, and it's also relatively short, and it's sort of going back to the whole fact that Aries sometimes struggle with finishing what they started. So, you know, a relatively short book will keep them engaged, and I think this is a really good one. If you're an Aries, you should check it out. Next up is my recommendation for Tauruses. Tauruses tend to be really loyal. They really crave stability in their lives. They can be a little stubborn sometimes, and they tend to be somewhat self-indulgent too. They really like the finer things in life. They are ruled by the planet Venus, which is of course the planet of love and beauty, so that is where that sort of influence comes in. They put a lot of importance into their physical possessions, definitely, and because of all that, I wanted to recommend to them like a really decadent, like beautifully written book. So for that, I decided to recommend The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This is a classic that follows a man who basically sells his soul to remain forever young. So, you know, that's definitely something that seems very Taurus-esque to do. You know, Dorian Gray, maybe he's a Taurus, we don't really know, but I would believe it if you told me he was. I just think that this book is so elegant, you know, it's so well written, it's so interesting, and I think that Oscar Wilde's musings on beauty and human nature and youth would really appeal to Taurus, definitely. So if you are a Taurus, I would definitely recommend The Picture of Dorian Gray. So next up are Geminis. Geminis kind of get a bad rap and people kind of consider them to be two-faced, but I think that's a pretty inaccurate stereotype, and in truth, Geminis tend to be more curious. social, maybe even restless sometimes. They're often really clever, and they really like to be intellectually stimulated. So for that reason, I wanted to recommend a book that was like very smart and one that sort of made me think about it long after I finished it, something that would keep them engaged. And for that, I decided to recommend Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. This is a sort of science fiction novel that follows these 4 scientists as they explore the mysterious Area X, which is this kind of environmental phenomenon that forever changes the landscape of this like coastal town. I read this entire series recently and I thought it was really interesting. It's kind of got a mysterious vibe around it. It's not a mystery per se, but you have so many questions going in, you have so many questions coming out, and it'll really keep you engaged the entire time by like thinking about the story and thinking about what you're reading, what's happening. And I think that Gemini, who really like to be intellectually stimulated, would really like this kind of story. So I would definitely check it out if you are a Gemini. Next up is Cancers. Cancers are pretty gentle, they're shy, they're caring. They also tend to be quite emotional. They love a good cry and they're also very sensitive to their environment and the people around them. For this reason, I wanted to recommend an emotional book, but one that would still have a happy ending, so you know they don't get too down in the dumps. I also kind of wanted a gentle writing style, like nothing too abrasive, nothing too like in your face. And I also wanted to emphasize in this recommendation like good friendships, because Cancers really like to make connections with the people around them. So I think that having a good friendship in the story that I'm recommending would be something they'd be interested in. For those reasons, I decided to go with Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. This is one of my favorite books of all time. It is a YA contemporary that follows a girl who is in her last year of whatever the British equivalent of high school is. And she is trying to figure out where she wants to go to college, what she wants to do with her life. And in the process, she draws fan art for her favorite podcast called Universe City. And then she finds out that the podcast is created by her neighbor, Alid. And they become very, very close friends through this last summer before Frances, the main character, goes to university. I really, like I said, I love this book so, so much. I think it definitely has a lot of that emotional weight. It made me cry multiple times, but some of the times that I cried were like tears of joy, you know, and happiness. This book is so emotional. It is so raw and real, and I think that that's something a Cancer would really like. I also think that the friendship between Alid and Frances is one of the best friendships I've ever seen written in young adult literature, so I think that is another thing that Cancer would really love. And this book is just incredible and amazing, and frankly I think anyone should read it if you haven't already, but if you are a Cancer, you should especially read this one. Next up on the list is Leo. Leo is a very magnetic, outgoing, and alluring person. They're very idealistic. A lot of the times they prefer fiction to reality too, and they love like really grand gestures, all of that sort of thing. So for Leos, I wanted to pick a recommendation that would be really dramatic and exciting. I wanted something maybe even a little bit romantic, because Leos are really idealistic and that tends to be associated with a lot of romanticism. So for this recommendation, I decided to go with Emma by Jane Austen. This is a classic that follows a young woman named Emma Woodhouse who is really determined to set all of her friends up with people in her society that she thinks they will get along with and be a good match for. And in the meantime, there's a lot of drama going on in Emma's life. There's a lot of romance, there's a lot of exciting things happening, a lot of grand gestures, and I think that Leos would definitely be a fan of the sort of dramatic nature of this book. It's also kind of whimsical too, which is something that they like. You know, they don't like to get things too serious, and Emma is definitely not too serious. So I definitely think that if you are a Leo, you should check out Emma by Jane Austen. Next up is my sun sign, and totally not biased, the best sign in the zodiac in my opinion, Virgo. Virgos tend to be really intelligent, really analytical, reserved also. They notice like tiny details a lot, and they're oftentimes attracted to people or situations that need their help. they kind of like to seek people that need help. So for this recommendation, I wanted to pick a book that was really smart and involves like thinking a lot, kind of similar to my recommendation for Gemini, but I also wanted something that had a little bit more of a mystery to it, a little bit more of that sort of suspenseful storytelling, because I think that appeals to Virgos a lot. So for this, I decided to go with Southland by Nina Revoire. This is a contemporary sort of historical fiction-y story that follows a woman named Jackie as she realizes that her grandfather has put in his will to give a large sum of money to this boy named Curtis, who she does not know anything about. And she basically decides to try to track him down, and within doing that, she kind of enters this sort of mystery surrounding the Watts riots in Los Angeles, and she sort of discovers how this Curtis and how her grandfather factor into that, and it's a sort of like mystery of like what happened to this boy, where is he, and like how can she track him down. So I really loved this book. I read it for school a few years ago and I really enjoyed it. This is, like I said, it's a mystery story. It follows two timelines, the timeline of like Curtis's life during the 1960s and the Watts riots, and also Jackie's timeline as she is trying to discover what happened to him and trying to track Curtis down. It's also very smart. I think Nina Revoire's prose is really interesting and really good. I think that the picture she paints of Los Angeles is, as somebody who lives near that area, is really realistic and really well done. It has a lot of interesting things to say about race and class and culture, and I really like that as well. And I think that Virgos would really enjoy this read, so if you're a Virgo, check it out. Next up on the list is Libras. Libras are super kind, they're really charming, they can also be really persuasive. They have a tendency to seek out and maintain balance. Their sign, like the little thing that represents them is scales, so you know, balance, they like that. But they're often peacemakers, diplomats. For that reason, I wanted to pick a book with a good balance between serious and funny. I thought that would be something that Libras would appreciate. And I also wanted something that maybe had like a morally gray main character, you know, where their morals are not in one place or another, you know, it's not a very specific hero or a very specific villain. I thought that would be something that Libras would also like a lot, and for this reason I decided to go with The Sympathizer by Viet Thanh Nguyen. This is a sort of historical fiction-y novel about a man who is a communist double agent who is spying on the American army during the Vietnam War, and basically after the fall of Saigon he is taken to America as a refugee and basically has to live there and live amongst Americans while still reporting back to his like communist base. This book is really, really great. I read it again for school, actually in the same class that I read Southland. I never see anybody talk about this book at all, but it is so well written. The main character is so good. It's definitely got that balance between serious and funny that I think that Libras would really like. You know, it's very humorous, but it's also obviously dealing with really serious topics like the Vietnam War. And speaking of serious topics, there is a pretty graphic description of sexual assault in this book, so watch out for that. That's a big trigger warning if you're interested in reading it at all. Outside of that, it's just super well written, it's super engaging, it's really long, but it also goes really quickly, so I would definitely recommend picking it up, especially if you are a Libra. Next up on the list is my rising sign, actually, Scorpio. Scorpios are really powerful, they're really determined, and they're also really intimidating. Scorpios in general never really seem to go through life being unnoticed. Like, people are really divisive about them, they either love them or they hate them, but either way, they're noticed by people. Scorpios really tend to hate superficiality. They like being in control in the situations that they're in as well. So for this book, I kind of had a hard time picking a recommendation, but you know, I finally went with some book that is really close to my heart as a Scorpio rising that I think also appeals to the Scorpio kind of vibe. This is something with a really strong and really powerful main character, and it's got a really complicated and really compelling story, and that is The Mists of Avalon by Marion Zimmer Bradley. This is a fantasy novel that is a retelling of Arthurian legend from the perspective of the women involved in his stories, specifically Morgan Le Fay, who is oftentimes considered the villain of the Arthurian legends. But this book really examines her story and her character and how, you know, maybe she was not as evil as legends written by men made her out to be, you know? And I think that's a really interesting take on the stories. I really, really loved this book. It's really long, but it took me a really short amount of time to get through just because I was so obsessed with the story. I was so obsessed with Morgan Le Fay and how her story was being told. I think it's really beautifully written, and I think that the examination into the Arthurian legend is really, really interesting, and it's unlike anything I've ever read before in relation to those stories, and I would highly recommend checking it out. I also definitely think Scorpios would really like it just because of the strength and the power that Morgan has. I feel like she herself exudes Scorpio energy in a way. So for that reason, I think that Scorpios should definitely check it out. This is another one where I think that anybody should check it out because I don't really ever hear a lot of people, especially on BookTube, talking about this book, even though it's so amazing. But especially if you are a Scorpio, you should definitely read it. We're gonna go into a little bit of a lighter recommendation with this one. This recommendation is for Sagittarius. Sagittariuses are super adventurous, they're really enthusiastic, they're really opinionated. They always try to be humorous, you know, even when it's kind of hard for them, you know, they kind of feel like their job is to be funny, which, you know, I really appreciate. They try to keep things positive and light. So for this recommendation, I wanted to do something really funny and endearing. I also wanted some kind of adventure book in a way. You know, I used the key phrase, like a fun romp of a story, you know, when I was trying to pick this recommendation. And so I then came to recommend Kill the Boy Band by Golden Wildowski. This is a young adult contemporary about these four friends who are really obsessed with this boy band. So they get a room in the hotel that they know the boy band is going to be staying in, and they kind of track them down and they kidnap one of the members, and from there everything just flies off the handle. I have talked about this book a lot in my recent videos because I read it recently, or I reread it recently, I should say, but this book is just super fun. It's really hilarious. It's a kind of dark comedy, so you can probably tell by the title, and I really liked it. It's really adventurous, really quirky, really fun, which I think that Sagittarius would really appreciate. So I would recommend checking it out if you are Sagittarius and it sounds like something you would be interested in. Next up in the list is Capricorn. Capricorns tend to be really serious. They're also really competent in what they do, and that makes them very successful. But they really value family and the home. That's something that they really value, and they are very responsible and hardworking as well. So as a result, for this recommendation, I wanted a book that involves strong family ties, a really strong family dynamic. I also wanted something realistic with like these very determined, hardworking characters. I think that would be really essential to this book recommendation as well, and for that reason I decided to go with The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I feel like not a lot of people have not read this book already, so you know, you probably have already picked it up. It is super popular and it deserves all that popularity. It is an absolutely brilliant book. This is a YA contemporary about a girl who is witness to her friend being shot by the police, even though he was not armed, and the police had absolutely no reason to shoot him. And then afterwards she kind of has to deal with the fallout. She goes to this sort of rich white private school that sort of clashes with her family life, where she lives in like a poorer area that has more minorities in it. And she has to sort of balance those two worlds in the fallout of this awful catastrophe. I picked this book specifically for Capricorns because there is a really strong family dynamic in this book. Star, the main character, her family ties are super strong, and the family is really well written. From what I hear, Angie Thomas in a lot of her novels does really implement that strong family dynamic, which I think Capricorns would be really into. I also think that Star is a really like hardworking and very determined main character, which I also think appeals to that sort of Capricorn energy, and I think that they would really appreciate this book. So if you are a Capricorn and you have not read this book already somehow, you should definitely check it out. Second to last sign that I'm going to be giving a recommendation to is Aquarius. Aquarians tend to be really unique. They're really individualistic. They're also really likable. They're very unique and interesting thinkers. They really think outside the box. That's kind of their thing. They're oftentimes really focused on the future too. They have a sort of like looking into the future outlook on life. So for that, I wanted to pick a book that was either utopian or dystopian, that kind of thing. So, you know, futuristic in that sense. I also wanted something that was a little bit quirky, you know, a little bit unusual, something that, you know, you don't see every day when you're reading books, and that's a little bit of on the different side. So for that, I decided to go with my most recent read, actually, Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. This book is a young adult novel that follows a girl named Jam, and she basically lives in a world where all evil has been eradicated until she awakens a painting that her mother paints of this like mysterious monster kind of thing, and she has to join the creature in finding somebody that lives at her best friend's house who is apparently doing evil, and they basically have to hunt that person down together. This book is, as you can probably tell from the little synopsis I just gave, very outside of the box. It's very interesting. It uses a lot of imagery, a lot of metaphor, and it's really heavy-handed with that. But I also think that it is really compelling and really well written as well. I've loved the writing style. It's also obviously utopian. It's set in a world where all evil has been eradicated, or supposedly all evil has been eradicated. And for that reason, I think that Aquarians would really appreciate it, just because it's really outside of the box. It has a lot of sort of outside of the box things to say as well. It definitely has a lot of themes that are really interesting and really worth delving into. It's also a quick read too, so you know, it won't take up most of your time. This is another one that I think all people should read, but especially if you are an Aquarius, you should definitely check Pet out. Final book recommendation for the final sign in the zodiac. You know, it must really kind of be rough to be a Pisces. You know, you have to scroll all the way down in your BuzzFeed listicle to find out which, like, you know, ice cream you are based on your zodiac sign. You know, you have to scroll all the way down in all of the threads and stuff on Twitter. So Pisces, I feel for you for that reason. But we have finally gotten to you. Basically, Pisces are really sweet. They tend to be really dreamy. A lot of the times they are artistic. They're very open-minded too, and they have a very go with the flow energy to them. So for this book, I wanted to pick something that was, you know, kind of interpretive, something that, you know, was not always direct in the writing style, something that had a little bit of a dreamy writing style and an artsiness to it as well. So for this recommendation, I decided to go with Aristotle and Dante, Discovered Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alire Sainz. This is a young adult contemporary about this boy named Aristotle, or Ari for short, who meets this other boy named Dante, and they basically come together and form this really deep friendship over the summer. This is just a very beautiful story that a lot of people have read and a lot of people have probably heard of, but I think that it would be very appropriate for Pisces to read because it does really have a very dreamlike quality, and you're sort of very swept up into the world and into the story of these two boys, and I think that that would really appeal to Pisces and to their nature. So, you know, if you somehow have not read this already and you're a Pisces, I highly, highly recommend getting to it because I absolutely adored it, and I think that most people that read it, but especially Pisces, will as well. Okay, so that is the end of my zodiac sign recommendation video. Leave in the comments what zodiac sign you are and whether or not you think I did a good job with the recommendation. You know, this is the first kind of video that I sort of filmed involving astrology, but I would love to do some more because, like I said, I'm really interested in astrology and I would love to implement it into book recommendations. I could definitely do like a part 2 of this video if you guys want more zodiac sign related recommendations, so let me know. Also, let me know if you've read any of these books, whether or not they were related to your zodiac sign. and what you thought of them. Also be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Like I said, I was really excited to make this and I think it turned out pretty well. So if you like it, that would be super great and I would really appreciate it. And also you can find my links in the description if you want to follow me on Twitter, Tumblr, or Goodreads, so be sure to check me out there as well. And finally, be sure to subscribe if you have not already. So yeah, do all of those things and I will see you all next time. Thanks so much for watching.